I think it's very difficult to generalize about all banks. It's a large group of private and publicly owned companies now, spanning many different levels of development with lots of different issues. The major international banks are absolutely aware of the reputation issues that face the industry. We all look at the same surveys, we all get the same feedback from clients, from our own employees, from politicians, from regulators. What has changed, I think, is you're starting to see clearer differentiation between different banks, different regulatory regimes. So I think in our case, and I'm biased because I work at HSBC, we're certainly very aware of the reputation of the industry as a whole, but we're also very aware that HSBC within that industry, just to use HSBC as an example, is developing a different reputation than the general reputation. And for some of our peers in the industry, it might feel a bit different. But I think what has changed over the last 18 months or so is a clearer differentiation between the major international banks. And I don't want to talk about competitors, but it's fairly clear some people are still struggling with reputational issues. Others have moved forward, are managing actively in a way to try and improve whatever reputational damage was caused during the financial crisis, and are also very conscious that in the future we're all going to need to be much more careful about reputational issues early on. I think that is really interesting, and it's not just something that's affected banks. It's affected all corporations. You've seen it just with this most sort of recent outburst of concern over privacy with the tech industry in the US. I don't think that industry was prepared for the controversy that was caused by Snowden, as an example. They are now playing catch up. That's where banks were 5 years ago. So I think, in a way, people might look at the banking sector as an example of how you have to deal with very big issues, learn, move forward, and develop better tools for managing reputation, because it's only going to become rather a bigger part of what we do in communications, but also a bigger part of what CEOs do in the future of any major organization, NGO, political organization, a government agency, or a company. I would think that the CEO spends 20 to 30% of his or her time dealing with reputation issues broadly defined. That's just the way the world is. There is a conflict at the heart of Davos. It's been there since Davos began 20, 30 years ago. I don't actually know when the first Davos was held, but certainly over the last 20 years, as Davos has become more and more important, more and more recognized as a gathering place, it has become obvious to everybody who attends that it's a bit odd to have everyone in a small Swiss ski resort having meetings, having discussions, closed off from the rest of the world, but at the same time, where else could you do this? I think that is the conflict at the heart of Davos. If you insist that none of the people who come here speak to each other, that doesn't sound like the right outcome. If you insist or expect that they do talk to each other every once in a while, which does sound like a good idea, where else would they do it? Davos, by an accident of history, by the drive of the people behind the World Economic Forum who started it so many years ago, has managed to create this space in January for people to get together. Mainly business leaders, some politicians as well. And I think the value of Davos is actually in the informal conversations that people can have in the corridors over a cup of coffee. I think we all know, if we're working in a corporation or working in government, it's actually very hard for people to find time to just have a chat, working with very packed schedules and so on. So I think I get the sense, and I haven't been here year after year after year, I get the sense that the people who come here are aware that they're in a privileged position. I think they are aware that there's a much bigger world outside this small Swiss ski resort. So they're not blind to how it looks to the rest of the world. But at the same time, there is real value in having people get together and just talk. I've certainly heard from my colleagues here at HSBC who've been spending time on different panels or meeting with clients. There have been some really good discussions around regulation in banking, as you'd expect, because we're a bank, but also around some of the other hot topics of the day, including privacy issues, dealing with technology. My colleagues have been having conversations they might not otherwise have had, and you have to think that that's a good thing.